And this past week has been an emotionally distressing time in our country. Obviously, with the the assassination of Charlie Kirk, the founder of Turning Point USA, and someone who I just grown to admire, just for his courage and his boldness for his beliefs, and most of all, just for representing Jesus Christ through his work and everything he was doing for this country. Um, he just did it in such a loving and kind way with everybody he came across on those college campuses and all those different videos you see of him. He doesn't get flustered. He doesn't get discouraged. He doesn't get angry. And he tried to just be respectful in conversation and debate with these college students. And I just really admired him. And I just I admired how he engaged with even the most hostile people that I would just want to, go back at and, and retaliate with. He did it with such patience and poise, especially for somebody his age. And he just really I just really felt like he personified Jesus Christ through his actions and through his attitude. And one of my favorite verses is 1 Peter 3:15, which says, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have." But listen to this part. "But do this with gentleness and respect." And I thought Charlie Kirk did that. And the one thing his passing has caused me to reflect on is how I'd answer people and how I talk to people that maybe I disagree with. Also, last week was the 24th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks on the World Trade Centers and the Pentagon. And obviously, there's a lot of emotions that stirs up thinking about remembering those things. But the events of last week just led to a surge in church attendance, and it's led to people returning to church for the first time in a long time since well before COVID, it seems like. This was posted on X. And I've seen, people giving their own testimonies on Threads, and I see a lot of accounts, but this was actually posted on X through their official accounts. It said September 14th, 2025, numerous Americans shared on X their return to church services after years of absence, citing feelings of renewal and community amidst cultural shifts. Barna Group data shows Gen Z and millennials leading regular attendance, nearly doubling from 2020 to 2 weekends per month, while Pew Research Center reports stabilization in Christian affiliation. Church Track estimates weekly attendance at 20% of Americans, up from the pandemic lows, with men now slightly outpacing women in a reversal of historical trends. And I shared this on my Facebook feed with a comment that we need to be ready as a church, and more importantly, personally as Christians, for the outpouring of the Holy Spirit that's coming. And it seems like Charlie Kirk's murder has ignited something. And there's some common themes that I'm seeing as I'm talking to more people, and they're coming from each person I've talked to. Just Christians in general feeling more bold to share their faith and to talk about Jesus Christ and what he's done for them in their lives. Just an attitude of humility and a desire for authentic worship of the Lord, which is refreshing. And also that the light drives out darkness. And let me tell you something, there's great opportunity here. But let me ask you this. If someone asked you, why are you a Christian? How would you answer them? And that's a tough question to answer. And I'll give you a story about myself. When I was 18 years old, I attended Infuge Camp in Nashville, Tennessee. And I was 18 and a graduating senior, and they had a special track for us that we'd go to. And they would take us to places like we went to a rehab facility for kids our age that were already using drugs and alcohol, and they were there for treatment. Also one for behavioral issues. And then one of the places they took us was to a prison. And this was on a juvenile detention center. This was like an actual prison for kids who were, being tried as an adult, and they were going to be there for a long time. And so they're going to be there for a long time. And I went there with other kids, a lot of kids I didn't know, and youth leaders I did not know. And we get there to this prison, and I'm sitting there, I'm 18 years old. I've not had a ton of life experience. And the youth leader I was with, he said, "Hey, will you share your testimony about why you came to Christ?" Well, I didn't know what to say. I mean, like I said, I had very little life experience. I hadn't done a ton of stuff in my life. And so I'm sitting here in a prison. These people are going to be there for a long time. And so I didn't know what to say. Now that I'm almost 40 years old, I probably have I have an answer. I could answer. I could give a response. But 18 years old, I was caught unprepared. And you just never know when you're going to be asked to share for the reason, for the hope that's within you. And so there may be an opportunity that comes up through all of this that somebody's going to say, "Hey, why are you a Christian? Why do you believe in this Jesus? Why do you believe in this stuff? And you're going to have to give a reason. So my question again to you is, how would you answer that? Why are you a Christian? What would you tell somebody? And my encouragement is you would spend some time in prayer this week and just in thought and just think about how you would respond to that question. What could you say to somebody that comes up to you and says, why do you believe this stuff? And so think about this also. How is God calling you to serve him? And I believe one of the things that we've missed out on as Christians is that God created us for a purpose, and the overall purpose that he created any of us is that we would glorify and honor him in all that we do. Just flat out, we would glorify and honor him. And it seems like there's a stirring in people this past week, and people want to do something for God. I felt it in my own spirit. So what is God asking you to do? For too long, we've been content as Christians just to be spectators. Once a week, sitting in service and just being a spectator of what's going on in God's house. And so we don't realize that true worship in a relationship with God aren't just spectator events. We have to be active participants in worship and active participants in our relationship. Colossians 3 tells us to set our minds on things above where Christ is. We get so hung up on the things that are going on in this world that we forget to look up. If we try to do things in our own strength, we're going to fail. But Jesus tells us in the Bible, he says that with men it's impossible, with God all things are possible. So what's God calling you to do? What's he putting on your heart that he's leading you to do? And we have to understand what that is. And what is he wanting you, how is he wanting you to serve? Henry Blackaby, in his study Experiencing God, talks about finding areas that God's already at work and then plugging into those things to help serve. And so what kinds of things can you join in on? But here's the final thing. Are we following Jesus the way we should be following him, or are there adjustments we need to make in our lives? This is from the book Multiply. It's written by Francis Chan and Mark Buvig. And it says this: a disciple is a follower. Becoming a disciple of Jesus is as simple as obeying his call to follow. It's impossible to be a disciple or follower of someone and not end up like that person. That's the whole point of being a disciple of Jesus. We imitate him, we carry on his ministry, and become like him in the process. And somehow many have come to believe that a person can be a Christian without being like Christ. A follower who doesn't follow. That doesn't make much sense. And it doesn't make sense. So which one are you? The follower of Jesus that imitates and looks like Jesus in words and actions? Or are you the follower that follows in just words only and just says, I'm a Christian, but you don't do the things that Jesus wants you to do? And sometimes the best witness that we can be is through how we live our lives. And sometimes the best testimony we can give is through our actions and how we serve others in love and humility. Jesus says, by their fruits you will know his disciples. So let me ask you this. I'm going to just throw this question out. Is revival coming? I have no idea. I have no clue. But it certainly seems like it could be. I heard of a Barna Group study a few months ago where it talked about Gen Z and how they're open to just all sorts of religion and truth. They're just desiring for truth, and they're open to hearing about religion for the first time in a long time. But here's the caveat. They're open to hearing about all religion. So for us as Christians, if we want to share Jesus, we're going to have opportunities to share Jesus. And so we have to be able to be bold enough to share Jesus. So are we going to be bold enough to set this world on fire for Jesus Christ? I hope so. I hope that we keep this boldness. Or we're going to be like the frog in a skillet. They're just sitting there and the skillet's heating up around us and it's getting warm and cozy and comfortable, and by the time we know it, we're cooked. There's our two choices. Are we going to be bold or going to be comfy? I asked our teenagers in chapel this week at our school this very thing about what fire can do. And I said it can be destructive. Fires can spread, they can destroy things, they can take things out. But it can also be productive. It can also be used for cooking, for our food, for nourishment. It can be used to keep us warm. There's other that can be used for light, to create light for us. So there's other uses for fire. But here's the thing. When fire is, when it's not being tended to, it can actually just spread all over the place. And so if we light a fire for Jesus, what is that thing going to do? Is it going to spread across this entire country? It might. I hope it does. I hope we see a big revival in this country. And I hope we see a reset in this country where it's going to be a reset for Jesus Christ, where we're going to be living our lives for him, and we're going to glorify and honor him. And the church will stop being complacent, and we're going to be just ready to actually do things for his purposes. So that's my question to you. Is revival coming? I don't know. But if it is, are you ready for it? And what adjustments can you make in your own life to where you're going to be a better follower of Jesus and you're going to be a better ambassador for him? That's a good question to ask yourself. Give it some thought this week, and hopefully the Lord's going to show you something through the Holy Spirit. Thank you all.